You have questions, we have answers. This is Jane Miller.
And this is Ken Miller. Welcome to our show all about real estate with Ken and Jane. So today we are going to talk about the seller disclosure statement. And the reason we're going to focus on the seller disclosure statement is because with the new real estate laws in effect in New Jersey, effective in August 2024, there's been a couple changes and updates, Jane. Namely, number one is that the seller disclosure is a mandatory requirement that must be completed by the sellers. It used to be that there was something called the seller disclosure waiver, whereas if the person didn't know or didn't live in the house, they could just sign a waiver saying that they're unaware of, they have no personal knowledge of it. Now, regardless of how much the seller knows or doesn't know, they must fill out a seller disclosure to the best of their ability, and you must answer it. And if you don't know something, you either put unknown, but you have to go through this very detailed form and document to the best of your knowledge what you do know about the house. And secondly, for rental properties, with the new law that went into effect in August, it is now mandatory that landlords also complete the seller disclosure. So those are two big changes to the regulation.
Absolutely, Ken. This is a new, and for the listener out there, this one could be quite boring. If you need to get up or drive through to get a coffee, please do so. This is a good opportunity before you fell asleep. So yes, you are absolutely right, Ken. In the past, when I got my license, I was always told it's good to have the seller disclosure filled out by the owner, but it's not if the seller declined, and you don't have to. That's as long as we give, as an agent, we give to the owner to fill in. If the owner declined it due to the language deficiency, or due to the owner never lived there, or the owner just don't want to go through the lengthy process, don't want to answer it, regardless the reason, that's okay as long as we give, because New Jersey is a buyer-aware state, so that's up to the buyer to discover. So although we always encourage owner to fill them in, especially the single-family home, there's a lot of things talk about the water issue, the basement, the structure, so on and so forth. That would definitely help the buyer understand the home, so encourage them to feel comfortable move forward with the offer. And we have been always doing that, but the thing is now it's become compulsory. I think, Ken, I'm not quite sure. Our office go back to March now, so March, mid-March something. So I'm not sure the state mandatory start from August, or they require from March, but hotline is August. So at the moment we have so many many new rules and new
August now. We're starting this so now it's in effect right now.
But before August, our office already started.
Right.
So anyone, any seller or landlord, we already asked for the disclosure, filled it out and sign it. So the transaction we did between March and August, we go back to the owner, ask them to fill them out, even though after effect, it was so good to have that on record. So we've been in the process to obtain all those, make sure they're all right. And you're absolutely right, Ken. In the past, as long as we provided from the agent perspective, that's good enough. But now, definitely it's not. So seller has to fill in the seller disclosure.
Yeah. So it will be a little bit of a dry topic. If you want to take a splash of water, you can.
No, I suggest our listeners to get a coffee, strong one.
But it's something important. And you did say something that it is a buyer beware. It's not necessarily the case so much in New Jersey, because the seller has an obligation to disclose any material defect, whether that question is specifically asked for on the seller disclosure or not. And that's something, and it could be something like the seller knows that there was a flood, that there was a basement had waterproofing issues, that there was termites, that the roof had a leak. These are all anything that's a material defect, that's something significant. And the agent has an obligation. You'll see when we get to the end of it, the list agent has an obligation to make sure that anything that they view is also noted on there. So you have to do some due diligence too.
And the buyer agent has to sign it too, because when buyer agent showing the house, obviously they view the home, so they have to sign it, the seller disclosure as well.
So there's a lot of legal stuff, verbiage in here. It also the beginning of the seller disclosure also says that it's not a substitute for the buyer doing their own due diligence,
Yes.
and hiring their own independent inspectors to do their inspections. But nonetheless, it is very useful, and it's something that any buyer looking at a house should obviously request now that it's mandatory, and secondly study it and make sure you're well familiar with everything that's indicated on this statement.
Absolutely. And with the Mueller team, we always, in the past, how long I can remember, we always attach the seller disclosure to MLS listing. So in that way, before the buyer going to see the home, hopefully the buyer agent download the documents and forward to the buyer. So in that way, the buyer is prepared. When they have any question, if they read the seller disclosure, there's any question. For example, if it says the HVAC was 30 years old, when they go down there, the basement or go in the equipment room, they can check to see whether visually can see whether that's still in good condition and before they make an offer. Because the worst thing is you made an offer and then you said, oh, by the way, that's old, but you saw the seller disclosure. When you go there, you saw the machine itself. So hopefully the offer is based on what you already know.
Yeah, or if the seller doesn't note the age of the HVAC, or they might just say unknown, which should also be indicative if you can do some detective work. The seller notes that there's a section on the seller disclosure for how long the seller has lived in the house. So if the seller has occupied the house for 15 or 20 years and they still write unknown as to the age of the HVAC, then putting those two facts together, the HVAC has got to be older than...
No, not necessarily, because I did had a home, the owner truly, they know they replaced it. They couldn't remember exactly when because, the times flies, right?
They may not. Okay,
so what I did was, in that case, we ordered the opera from the township. So, and then the opera shows the permit was closed in when.
Right.
So in that case, actually, we discovered the permit was pulled, but they never closed it, which is a good thing. So because we found it, and then we called the township to close the permit. Mm-hmm. So it's one stone killed two birds. So that was a good one.
Yeah. So the first part of the seller disclosure, again, we're going to go through this and summarize some of the important points. The first part of the seller disclosure asks for occupancy, what year, how long the current owner has owned the property, the age of the house, and if they have a copy of their deed in possession. And some of this stuff, some of these questions on the seller disclosure are not as pertinent now as they were maybe 20, 30 years ago, because the copy of the deed, namely, is something that's electronically available through the counties. Everything is an electronic record. So whether the seller has the physical original copy of the deed or not is irrelevant, as long as because from the title search, it'll determine if the title chain. So that's not that indicative. The second section talks about the roof, the age of the roof, and if they're aware of any leaks or any repairs. So that's a critical component. Obviously, the roof of the house is a major structural issue. So you want to be, again, this is the best of the seller's knowledge, and and they have to be as truthful, as possible in filling this out. And if there's been any roof leaks, anything that's a yes, then you have to fill out explained. Okay, you might say 5 years ago there was a leak in the roof. It was a due to a clogged gutter, or there was a soffit that needed to be resealed, or something, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it talks about attics. The next section is attics, basement, and crawl spaces. And of course, for the basement, it's asking, does the basement have any sump pumps? And if it does, are you aware of any problems with the sump pumps? And then it also asks further, are you familiar if there's any dampness or any mold or any water damage or any attempts in the past to repair water damage?
Yes, that's very important.
So those are all important questions. So by by a buyer reviewing the seller disclosure, they're going to get a good idea of what's going on with the house. I mean, that's the extent. And again, Jane, I know you said buyer beware, but now the case law has changed, where now it's really the seller has an obligation, like it says.
The seller always have obligation
to fully disclose everything. It's not like the 70s where it's the seller can withhold anything material.
Well, I mean, maybe what I said earlier wasn't exactly what I meant precisely. What I meant is, regardless what seller tell you, the buyer still have to do full investigation themselves. Hire the home inspector, do it yourself. Even though the seller disclosed to the best of their knowledge, the buyer has to do all the process to ensure you are satisfied with the condition.
Right. And then the other question on this section, which we covered in a prior show, they ask, are you aware of any cracks or bulges in the foundation? And as the listeners may recall from a prior show, we had a whole show focusing on foundation issues and the whole thing, how serious sometimes cracks can be, and of course bulges. And so that's a question that's on the seller disclosure, addressed to the seller to disclose what.
Sometimes, funny enough, a lot of sellers didn't notice.
That's true. Yeah.
They didn't. They've been living there so long, they didn't notice.
Or
it.
they may have because they don't go to the basement. If they have a lot, or it's dark and they have a lot of storage stuff, and there might be things blocking the walls. And unless you actually go there with a flashlight and a level, and you look for it, you may not. You may be truly unaware of it.
Yes. So, once again, it's to the seller best knowledge. But if you knew about it and then you lie about on the seller disclosure, that's a legal liability to the seller. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then the last part of this section talks about the attic. Are you aware of if you have an attic fan, any problems with its operation? Are you aware of any restrictions on the attic? So that's the last part.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Then the next section is termites and wood destroying insects. That's always a big topic. And anybody doing whenever a buyer does a home inspection, it's almost mandatory that, certainly for the lender, if you're getting a loan, it's mandatory that you have a wood-destroying insect inspection report. And this may possibly be done by the home inspector if they're licensed, or if not, they have to bring in a certified, wood-destroying insect inspector. But they're asking the seller what they know historically about the house. And oftentimes sellers will answer this question that, yes, we are aware of termite treatment or wood-destroying insect treatment because we might have a PM, preventive maintenance contract, to do this on a recurrent basis. So that might be something that's great that they're doing.
A lot of time, right, Ken, in New Jersey, it is very hard to avoid the termite because we have the name, the Garden State. We have a lot of trees, right? Yeah. So it's naturally you have the termite. But in my experience, opinion, as long as termite is treated and also the damage has been repaired, there shouldn't be any issue. A lot of buyers scared of a termite. But if you bought a house that doesn't have a termite, and later on they may have because the natural things, right? So as long as prevention is the key, just have sign up the contractor so they can come annually or biannually to check.
And if it's not termites, it could be carpenter ants.
Yeah, carpenter ants,
or
carpenter
bees.
Yeah,
exactly. Choose the wood, and that's common sometimes.
Yes.
That's but everything termites and all these wood-destroying insects are totally treatable.
Yes,
that's the main
absolutely.
Thing. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, we're due for a break. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after these messages. Okay, welcome back. We're going to continue we're going over the seller disclosure. I should say, based on the length of the seller disclosure, we're going to cover some of the more important things and some of the recent changes. We don't have time to go into detail in every section of it. So we covered the termites, wood-destroying insects. The next section asks about structural things. That's mainly asking if you're aware of any shifts or changes in the building and the foundation. Also, if you're so that's usually the seller's answer no, because if the foundation is shifting, then you've got a big problem with the house.
Yes.
But usually, and then additions and remodeling. That's a very important topic. They ask, are you aware if there's any additions to the house? Because if the answer yes, then the question is, were the proper permits obtained? So that's a red flag. If they say yes, there's additions, but no, they don't have any. They're not sure of the permits. Then you know that that's. That could be something needs to be investigated, or it could be a concern.
Yeah.
The next section talks about public water and sewage and whether you have public water source or well water, and then the type of sewage system you have if you're on sewer versus septic, and then there's a whole bunch of questions on that. Now we're going to talk a little bit on the HVAC system, which we spoke about at the beginning of the show. That there's questions on the type of air conditioning system you have, whether it's central or if you have any air conditioning or wall units, the age of the system, the type, whether it's a forced air or other system, and likewise with the furnace, the type of furnace, if you're aware of any problems with it. So again, those are all important things, and that can help you make a qualified decision on how to evaluate the home, because a lot of times I believe buyers, they look at the price, they look at the updates, and they also look at the age of the roof and the condition, as well as the age and condition of the major appliances, namely the HVAC.
Yeah. A lot of time people ask me why the two home similar, one sold so much, right? Like a 40,000 more. And why? First of all, the floor plan can be a big factor, or the decor in the house, or how updated the home is. But mainly, if the two home is very similar in floor plan, very similar condition, the decor and everything, maybe the hardcore factor. Like if a house have a new roof, it's like average roof is like 10 to 15,000 is average size home, not a large home. So average is 10 to 15,000. And you have HVAC, it's like around 15,000 for a set for a good quality one plus the permit. And, if the window now is very expensive now. So if you have a new roof, new window, new HVAC, hot water heater, the house added up is almost 40 to 50 grand out there. Plus, if you do a new kitchen, new bathrooms, that's so additional of that too. So that's really add up. When the buyer make an offer, they often, based on these hard factors too. Yeah. So if the seller feel, if I do anything, would a new roof going to help me? In my opinion, yes. If your roof is really old, and I would say replace the roof may be a good way to go before you put on the market. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have a 30 years old roof, I mean, for the buyer, they may have a hard time to get insurance, the homeowner insurance. Even you said, I've been living here 30 years, I have never had a problem, but things change. So because you've been living in the house for 30 years, you have the continuing in your policy, but the new buyer may not able to get a policy. So I would always recommend the owner, if your roof is, older, like 30 years old, replace it before you put on the market. That would be the
because you've run into that problem from different buyers where even though the roof had no conditions of being leaking, or it's been perfectly functioning,
never
retaining the water, but the lender stepped in and said, nope, we're not going to give a loan
because we can't get insurance, homeowner insurance, and plus if you're a 25-year-old roof, say if you're 20 years old, right, you probably can get insurance, but you leaked before, and if you should replace it because you take that worry out of buyer's mind. And then the whole transaction will be much smoother, more attractive to the buyer, because once they close the home, they don't have to spend a big bucks on the big items such as a roof. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a good point, Jane. So moving on, the seller disclosure also has sections on the electrical, namely asking you the type of wiring, the amperage of the panel. And again, a lot of sellers for this don't know that. So it's best if you're not sure whether it's the wiring is copper or aluminum or other, a lot of times you just check the box that's for unknown. Likewise, for the amperage of the panel, it's asking, do you have 100 amps, 150 amps, 200 amps? If you really truly don't know, just there's boxes to check that's just unknown.
Yeah.
Then there's a whole section on land drainage and environmental hazards. And this asking questions that range from if you're aware of there ever been any underground storage tanks or any leaks on the property, or any declarations from any agencies that there's an adverse condition either on the property or within the vicinity of the property. Mm-hmm. So again, most sellers are not. Most of these conditions we don't really usually encounter.
Yes.
But again, the seller has to fill it out to the best of their knowledge, and if
there is, you
must disclose it. Right.
Absolutely.
The next section talks about deeds and the homeowners association. So it's asking if the property is subject to any deed restrictions or other limitations that it may be used, and limitations could be because the property is in an historic district, which is very important, because if it's in a historic district, then there's certain limitations on the renovations you can make to the house. Mm-hmm. You may not be able to build it or expand it or do any modifications to it. We had that with one particular house.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Then it's also asking, is it part of any condominium association or any homeowners association? So even if you have a single family home, you could still, it's very important to get disclosure if there's any homeowners association, because certain communities belong to homeowners associations, and there could be a nominal fee assessed just for that. It's not going to be the significance of being a condo association.
No,
but still,
even single family they do. And I remember there was one community in Monroe, and when you join, you have to pay a few thousand, a couple of thousand at that time to join them. So I remember to ask the agent, particularly ask the seller agent and the sellers, and they said absolutely not. At the end, turned out to be true.
Right. That's why on this section they ask if you are part of a condominium association. They ask for the name of the association and the phone number, and they're asking also. I believe there's a section here if there's the bylaws. Have there been any changes to the bylaws or the rules?
I mean, a lot of time the seller may not know the bylaw change because they may not be attending every meeting,
or they may
right?
not, or they may get it. Or not,
because my suggestion to the audience there is, just put your association number and let the buyer attorney, buyer agent to do their own diligence. So in that way, if you don't know, you just say not aware of, but please ask them to do their own diligence, but provide the association name and number. That's very important.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then the buyer and certainly the buyer's agent, any experienced buyer's agent will have the basic knowledge to know that normally when a unit that's part of an association is purchased, there's usually a one-time capital contribution that the buyer must pay. And like you said, in certain communities, this can be quite significant. It can be 3 to 6 times the monthly maintenance fee. Yeah. That's just a one-shot deal that you pay, and that money is non-refundable.
Yeah, so some refundable, some not refundable. But once again, today, let's stick to the topic with the seller disclosure. Let's case by case. Otherwise, we'll be here till afternoon.
Right. So then there's another section, miscellaneous, asks, are there any mortgages on the property? Are you aware of any issue that could prevent you from conveying clear title? So if you know there's a title issue with the property, mainly that if there's let's say you own the property with a sister and the sister is out of state and you haven't spoken to her in 5 years, that could be an issue where there could be an issue with title because you both everybody who's on the title would have to sign the deed. So again, you want to, if there's anything, you don't have to be an attorney, but if there's anything that you foresee as a seller, you have to disclose that.
But once again, right, I would highly recommend all the buyers and the sellers, before you enter into the contract, please hire your attorney first. Okay. A lot of people say, no, let's buy a house or sold a house and then looking for an attorney, such as these questions, right? I mean, you ask the agent can help you, but we cannot give a legal advice. So the best thing is if you already talk to the lawyer and decided which lawyer, you can just ask lawyer for the question. So, so I think the lawyer probably can explain to you much better than the agent way can, and especially legal way, make sure you get it right advice, how to fill in the form, because now the form is crucial now. So.
Right, and then the next section briefly covers radon gas. Radon can be a problem in certain parts of New Jersey. So there's a section that asks you if you're aware of there's any issue with radon. Has a property been tested? And then it gives you, if it has been tested, it asks for if there's been any efforts to mitigate the radon levels. And
that thing, I always have a question. The first question, are you waive your right? A lot of seller check no. I mean, you should check yes, because if you check no, that means you know something. You have right to remain silent. So you should check yes, and then if that means you know anything, you will tell the buyer.
Right, but if you check no, that you don't wish to discuss it, then you must as stated in the seller disclosure, you must discuss it at the time a contract of sale is entered into.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't solve you. It doesn't really. So saying no, I don't wish to disclose it, really doesn't do any benefit to the seller, because ultimately you have to disclose it.
My point is, a lot of sellers check that box by mistake.
Right.
They're not saying I don't want this closed. They just check. They read it.
It's very
they're confusing. That's why they check yes. The waive the right. You should say that's why. It's not they deliberately doing it. They just did it by mistake. That's what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the next section talks about the appliances. This section, you're supposed to indicate all the appliances that the house comes with. And it also notes that the contract will govern what appliances are transferred to the buyer. But this section asks for what you have: a refrigerator, a range, a microwave, lawn sprinklers,
that's
above
very
ground.
Self-explanatory.
That's self-explanatory. So then we're going to talk. There's a whole section on if the house has solar panels. If it does, there's questions on are you under there are three sets of questions. Are you either on the option to payments? Are you making payments to own it? Or are you leasing it? Or do you strictly own it outright? So
Yeah,
that's
that's very important because that happened in the past. Thank God not with us, but some agent didn't put it on. So I don't know how the agent showing the house, going there, see a seller, the solar panel on the roof, didn't ask a question.
Right.
So at the closing, they realized, but that buyer, unfortunately, very tight with serviceability, and the solar was leased, so that would delay the closing. Almost could not close.
Okay.
So, but once again, now the seller disclosure that was before this section added, but now they have it, so that's a good thing.
Right, and then lastly, because we're running a little short on time, is the flood risk. There's the last part of the seller disclosure talks about the risk if the seller is aware if the property is located in an especially designated flood hazard area, if the property is mandated to have flood insurance. There's a whole section if they've ever received
That
FEMA.
is the one you have to fill in.
Yeah,
that's the new law.
And that I think and this was the reason why that I think the efforts behind the law to make it mandatory for rentals to have to fill out the seller disclosure was because they want to make sure that tenants are aware if they're living in a flood risk area for obvious reasons. So this is quite important. And then the seller disclosure is signed by the sellers. It's also signed by the list agent, and then it's presented to the buyer and the buyer's agent for signature at the time the contract is.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very important document and a very useful source of information about the house.
Yeah, that should take some homework. I know a lot of our sellers say, oh my God, Jane, it's like an exam, right? Take a long time to do, like a big essay. But that's now it's become super, super important. It's a part of the compulsory document. So take some time to make sure, fill in to your best knowledge.
Yeah, grab a cup of coffee or a couple of cups and then, do it. And then if you have questions on something that you're not sure of, but the answer, mainly you want to answer truthfully. And if you have questions on it, just refer to your list agent about what if you need an explanation or your attorney. Yeah. All right. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.